He didn't call me mother of the groom. He called me the woman behind the scenes. And that's when I realized maybe I wasn't part of the picture. I was just holding the frame. My name is Margaret. I'm 60 years old, retired, and for the most part, at peace with a quieter life. I lost my husband, Frank, 9 years ago. Since then, it's just been me and the routines. Morning coffee, crossword puzzles, and every other Sunday dinner with my son, Evan. When Evan told me he was getting married, I cried. Not sad tears, just that kind of emotion you don't realize you've been saving up for years. He looked happy. He was glowing in a way I hadn't seen since he got his first job out of college. And his fiancée, Lainey, was polite, composed, a little brisk. But I told myself she was just busy, maybe nervous around me. They said the wedding would be in Charleston, South Carolina by the river. Elegant, expensive. Evan sat across from me one evening and said, "Mom, I hate to ask this, but could you help out a little with the wedding?" I didn't even hesitate. I told him yes before he finished the sentence. I had a small retirement account from my time working as a head bookkeeper at Jefferson High. Not a fortune, but enough. I offered $63,000, split into 2 payments. $46,000 upfront to book the venue and catering. The other $17,000 I'd send just before the wedding to cover the final bills. I didn't ask for my name on anything. I didn't ask for credit. I just wanted to be part of this moment in his life. After all, I raised him to believe in love, in family, in showing up for the people who matter. Lainey sent me a simple thank you card. No signature, no note inside. Just thank you printed in gold foil. But I brushed that off. Maybe it was her style. Back then, I thought my support would make me feel included, that helping would make me feel needed. And for a while, I let myself believe I wasn't just a guest. I was still his mother. But looking back, that moment at the kitchen table, me reaching across to reassure him, him barely meeting my eyes, that was probably the last time I felt like I belonged. And the wedding hadn't even started yet. There's a kind of shift that happens in silence. Not a bang, not a blowout. Just little moments that start to rearrange your place in a room. At first, it was small things. Lainey didn't include me in the cake tasting, said it was last minute and only the bride and groom needed to be there. I nodded and smiled. I was taught not to take things personally. Then the guest list came around. I had assumed I'd be helping with invites, at least sending a few to family friends from church. But when I asked, Lainey said, "Oh, we already handled that through our wedding site. It's just easier that way." That phrase, just easier that way, started to show up a lot. Evan picked it up too. When I offered to help coordinate flowers, "It's just easier this way, Mom." When I asked about the seating chart, "Don't worry about it." One afternoon, I stopped by their apartment to drop off a photo album I'd made. Baby pictures of Evan, snapshots with his dad, Christmas mornings, missing teeth, scraped knees. I thought maybe it could be part of the reception display. Lainey looked at it, smiled politely and said, "We're going with a more minimalist aesthetic." Minimalist. Like memories cluttered the vision. When I saw the draft of the seating chart, my name wasn't even at the family table. I was seated near the back, close to the bar. When I asked Evan if that was a mistake, he hesitated. Lainey thought the head table should be streamlined for symmetry. It was a wedding, not a math equation. I'm not sure when exactly I stopped speaking up. Maybe after the 3rd or 4th time, I was met with a tight smile and a thanks but no thanks. I started to feel like every suggestion I made was an interruption. So I folded into the background. I told myself I was just tired, that it wasn't about me, that weddings are stressful. But deep down, I felt it. That soft, sinking feeling that I was no longer a part of the story, just a footnote at best. And if you've ever been in that place, where you feel yourself disappearing in a room full of people you love, you know exactly what I mean. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever been included but only halfway? Not for your presence, but for your usefulness? I'd really love to hear your story, because mine was only just beginning. The sun was just beginning to set over the river when I stepped onto the lawn of the wedding venue. Charleston had that glow in the evening, warm, balden, like everything had been brushed with honey. And yet, somehow, I felt colder than I had in years. People buzzed around me in tailored suits and chiffon dresses, laughing, sipping cocktails, snapping selfies with the flower wall. I stood there for a minute, clutching my small evening bag, searching for Evan. I spotted him across the patio, glass in hand, laughing with Lainey and her friends. He didn't notice me. Eventually, a staff member guided me to my seat. I wasn't at the family table. I wasn't even in the next row. My place card was tucked near the back corner, between an uncle I barely remembered and one of Lainey's co-workers who introduced herself and immediately began scrolling on her phone. I told myself not to make a scene. That wasn't who I was. I straightened my shawl and kept a polite smile on my face. And then came the toast. Evan stood tall, champagne in hand, and thanked everyone for coming. He told stories about college, about meeting Lainey, about building a future. And then he looked toward me, not at me, toward me, and said with a chuckle, "And of course, thanks to my mom, who's always been the quiet force behind the scenes. She knows her place and she plays it well. Couldn't have done it without you, Mom." People laughed. Polite, awkward laughter, the kind you give when you're not sure if something was supposed to be funny, but you laugh anyway to keep the energy light. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just froze. Not from shock, from clarity. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't nerves. That was how he saw me. Useful, invisible, background. He meant it. And suddenly, I wasn't sitting at the wedding of my only son. I was sitting in the ruins of everything I thought I still meant to him. I watched him raise his glass, turn back to the crowd. I looked down at my hands resting quietly in my lap. I thought about all the years I had spent putting pieces together for him, picking up the pieces, covering the gaps, filling the spaces where no one else bothered. And now, I was just a placeholder. But only for tonight, because something inside me had just shifted, and this time, I wouldn't be folding myself smaller to make others more comfortable. That night, back at the hotel, I didn't cry. I sat in the armchair by the window, still in my navy dress, my heels kicked off and my hands resting on my knees. The laughter from the reception still echoed faintly through the floorboards, but inside me, everything had gone still. I opened my phone. My bank app loaded slowly on the hotel Wi-Fi. There it was, $17,000, scheduled to be wired first thing Monday morning, the second half of my so-called gift. I stared at that number for a long time. It didn't feel like generosity anymore. It felt like erasure, like I had funded my own disappearance. I scrolled back through my emails. There it was, an old thread between Evan and me, dated 6 months ago. The subject line was wedding budget. Inside, I found it clear as day. Once it's all settled, I'll figure out how to pay you back for the second half, or maybe we can draft something official. But seriously, Mom, you're saving us. No signatures, no contracts, but enough. That's when something inside me clicked. Not in anger, but in awareness. I had spent decades teaching kids to be responsible, keeping other people's books in perfect order, making sure every decimal point added up. Yet in my own life, I'd been giving things away, time, energy, money, without asking for anything documented in return. But that's what people like me were taught, right? Love doesn't keep score. Good mothers don't draw lines. Well, maybe it was time for good mothers to learn how to draw boundaries. I opened my banking app again and hovered over the Cancel Scheduled Transfer button. My finger trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of doing something for myself, not for someone else. And then I pressed it. A soft chime and a message. Transfer successfully canceled. I sat back in the chair, exhaled deeply, and stared out the window into the Charleston night. The stars were faint, the breeze gentle. But I wasn't thinking about romance or sentiment. I was thinking about value, my value. The next morning, I printed the email thread and highlighted the section about repayment. I tucked it into an envelope and slipped it into my bag, not to make a scene, just to be prepared. because from this point on, I wasn't going to ask to be seen. I was going to make sure I couldn't be ignored. The Monday after the wedding, I woke up early, not from anxiety, but from clarity. I brewed a small cup of tea in the hotel room, opened the window just enough to let in the salt air, and sat down at the desk. Then I opened my email. Subject line: regarding remaining wedding funds, please read. It wasn't dramatic. I kept it short, professional, steady, like a woman who had worked 40 years around principals, auditors, and school board presidents. Hi, Evan. After reflecting on this weekend and reviewing our previous discussions, I've decided not to proceed with the remaining $17,000 transfer. I trust that you and Lainey will be able to handle the final wedding costs as a married couple. Best, Mom. I read it twice. Then I hit send. No attachment, no warning, just a quiet correction. By noon, the email was marked read. By 1:45 p.m., I got a text from Evan. Hey, Mom, can we talk? I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I needed space. A conversation would turn into a guilt trip, a backpedal, a scramble to make things feel okay again. And for once, I didn't want to feel okay. I wanted to feel clear. That evening, I flew home. The Charleston airport was crowded, loud, but I moved through it like someone who had nothing to explain. When I landed, I picked up groceries, did laundry, and watered my plants. And I felt free. Not triumphant, not vindicated, just free. Over the next few days, I heard nothing from Evan. And that silence? It didn't feel cruel. It felt earned. He needed time to realize I wasn't just going to stand in the corner anymore, quietly applauding his life. By the end of the week, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Inside was a check, $2,500. A note clipped to it said, "Just to start, I know I owe you more." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just folded it up, placed it in a drawer, and whispered, "That's more like it." No threats, no confrontation, no courtroom. Just a simple shift of weight. I had finally stopped giving everything away for free. And that changed everything. I didn't cash the check. I tucked it into the drawer with my tea towels, the ones embroidered with tiny yellow lemons, and I left it there. Not because I didn't need the money, but because it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about recognition. And that was the first time in a long time someone had handed me even a corner of it. A few weeks later, I moved into a new apartment. Just me. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor with a tiny balcony that caught the afternoon sun. I hung up the framed photo of Frank from our anniversary trip to Maine, put my favorite mug on an open shelf, filled the pantry the way I liked, labels and all. No one moved things behind me. No one rolled their eyes when I bought real butter instead of vegan spread. I played music in the kitchen, hummed as I cooked. Some nights I lit a candle just because I wanted to, not because guests were coming. I wasn't angry anymore. What I felt now was something quieter, like peace with a backbone. Evan didn't call much in those first months. I didn't chase. I figured if he wanted to speak, he would. And one morning, he did. He came by with coffee and a bag of cinnamon rolls, just like the ones he used to beg for as a kid. He didn't apologize, not directly, but he asked how I'd been sleeping. He fixed the light in my hallway. He looked around and said, "This place feels like you." I just nodded, because it did. A few weeks later, I got a card in the mail. No fancy words, no long explanation, just one line. "I see you now." That was all. And honestly, that was enough. We don't always get the apology we want, or the public acknowledgement we deserve. But sometimes, the quiet shift, the change in tone, the respect in someone's eyes, that's more powerful than any speech. I still make tea the way I like. I still open the drawer sometimes and glance at that check. Not to cash it, just to remind myself of something I nearly forgot. That being a mother doesn't mean disappearing. That being generous doesn't mean being erased. And that when someone tries to put you in your place, it's perfectly okay to remind them. You don't take up space. You hold it. Your turn. Have you ever stayed quiet too long and then finally stood up for yourself in a way no one saw coming? Leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this story spoke to you, just know You're not invisible. Not here. Not anymore.